Elias Carter had spent 12 lonely years running a small cattle ranch in the Montana Territory. At 39, he trusted horses more than people and preferred mountain silence to crowded towns. One cold autumn afternoon, while checking a remote fence line, he heard a woman's desperate cry rising from the forest. He immediately rode toward the sound, pushing his horse through thick pine trees. A few moments later, he saw an Apache woman lying beside a fallen tree. Her leg was badly wounded, and a massive grizzly stood between her and safety. Elias froze briefly, knowing one mistake could cost them both their lives. The bear roared and charged. Elias fired his rifle into the ground beside it, hoping the noise would frighten the animal away. Instead, the grizzly turned toward him. Elias raised his arms and shouted, trying to appear larger while slowly moving between the bear and the injured woman. The animal lunged again. Elias barely escaped its claws, rolling across the dirt as branches snapped behind him. His rifle disappeared beneath a bush. With nothing left except a heavy axe, he grabbed it and prepared himself. The grizzly charged a third time, forcing Elias into a desperate fight. After several terrifying moments, the wounded woman suddenly struck a nearby metal cooking pan against a rock. The sharp noise startled the animal long enough for Elias to land a powerful blow near its shoulder. The grizzly finally retreated into the forest, leaving both survivors exhausted, frightened, and barely believing they had escaped. Elias immediately turned toward the woman. She was conscious, but dangerously weak. He tore a strip from his shirt and carefully wrapped her injured leg. She watched him silently, studying his face. Finally, she whispered that her name was Naya and thanked him for risking his life. Elias carried Naya to his nearby cabin because she could not walk. He built a warm fire, prepared clean water, and gave her food. She explained that she had been traveling alone when her horse was frightened by the bear. During the fall, she injured herself and became trapped. For 3 days, Elias cared for Naya while the storm outside made travel impossible. Their conversations slowly became easier. She told him about her family and the mountains where she had grown up. Elias shared stories about his ranch, his late parents, and the loneliness that had followed their deaths. Naya noticed an old photograph above Elias's fireplace, showing him standing beside a beautiful woman. When she asked about her, Elias became quiet. He explained that the woman had been his fiancée, Clara, who died during a difficult winter many years earlier. Since then, he had stopped allowing anyone close to his heart. Naya understood his silence. She did not press him further. Instead, she spent her days helping around the cabin while her strength returned. She repaired a torn saddle, prepared herbs, and taught Elias several useful mountain skills. He began realizing that her presence had brought warmth into a home that had felt empty for years. On the 4th morning, Naya announced that she was strong enough to leave. Elias prepared her horse and packed food for the journey. He expected to feel relieved, yet something inside him felt strangely heavy. Before mounting, Naya turned toward him and promised that she would never forget what he had done. Elias watched her disappear between the trees. For the first time in years, he realized he missed someone. He returned to his cabin and noticed the room felt colder than before. Then he discovered something beside the fireplace. Naya had left behind a small leather pouch. Inside was a beautifully carved silver pendant, shaped like 2 mountains beneath a rising sun. Elias remembered Naya wearing it around her neck when he first found her. Beneath the pendant was a small folded piece of leather containing a message. It read, "You saved my life. Now let me save yours." Elias could not understand what she meant. Several weeks passed before he heard horses approaching his ranch. When he stepped outside, he saw Naya riding toward him, accompanied by several members of her family. His surprise quickly turned into concern when he noticed the serious expressions on their faces. Naya dismounted and explained that the grizzly attack had not been an accident. Hunters had driven the animal toward the valley after illegally trapping wildlife near her people's hunting grounds. Worse, a group of land thieves planned to force several families away from their mountain homes. Naya had returned because she needed Elias's help. She knew he understood the land better than almost anyone in the region. Elias agreed immediately, not because he wanted recognition, but because he remembered how helpless Naya had been beside that tree and could not ignore another injustice. Together, Elias, Naya, and several trusted families gathered evidence of the illegal activities. They discovered hidden traps, stolen livestock, and documents proving that corrupt businessmen intended to claim land belonging to families who had lived there for generations. Elias carried the evidence to the territorial authorities in the nearest town. The land thieves tried to stop him on the road. 3 armed men surrounded his wagon, demanding the documents. Elias refused to surrender them. Before violence could begin, Naya and several riders appeared from the hills. The attackers realized they were outnumbered and fled, leaving behind weapons and valuable evidence. Authorities eventually arrested the men responsible and investigated the businessmen behind the scheme. The mountain families were allowed to remain safely on their land. Naya thanked Elias for standing beside her people, but Elias told her that she had already given him something far more valuable than gratitude. He held up the silver pendant. "You said you would save my life," he said. "I think you already did." Naya smiled and explained that the pendant represented a promise of friendship, trust, and a new beginning. She had given it only to someone she believed deserved a place in her future. Months later, Naya returned to Elias's ranch, this time not as an injured stranger, but as a welcome guest. Together they expanded the ranch's garden, repaired the barns, and built a small guest house near the mountains. Their relationship grew slowly through respect and shared work rather than sudden promises. One spring morning, Elias found Naya standing beneath the same pine trees where he had first discovered her. She handed him the pendant again and said she no longer needed it as a reminder. Elias smiled and asked why. Naya answered simply, "Because now you know where your future is." From that day forward, the ranch became a meeting place where travelers could find food, shelter, and kindness. Elias eventually understood that the Grizzly had not only threatened 2 lives that autumn afternoon, it had brought 2 lonely people together. His greatest reward was not the pendant itself, but the family and purpose he found afterward.